Welcome to Conversations with Doc Martin. This video series focuses on extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. Today is certainly no exception. We are joined by Dr. Dan Ginader. Dan is a doctor of physical therapy who's been practicing in an orthopedic setting since he graduated in 2017. In the pandemic, he started to share some of his knowledge on social media to help people deal with their aches and pains in the comfort of their own home. This has led him to over 170,000 followers on Instagram and 770,000 followers on TikTok. His videos are educational, entertaining, and we are super excited to welcome Dr. Dan to continue to spread his message of physical health here on our channel. So Dan, welcome to you. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for having me. I couldn't be happier to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your background. I certainly summarized you're a doctor of physical therapy, treating patients full time, and the pandemic hits. So walk us through a little bit of what made you want to become a physical therapist, and then bring us through the pandemic.
Gotcha. So first things first, the only thing that I ever wanted to be was a professional baseball player.
Nice.
Other than that, everything was secondary. I played baseball my whole life. I played baseball through undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And undergrad is kind of where I really honed in on physical therapy as a profession. It became pretty clear that baseball was not going to be in my future. A lot of arm trouble, which again kind of directed me towards physical therapy. But I knew that I didn't want to work a desk job. I knew that I for sure wanted to work in a setting where I was able to help people. I wanted to be around active people and be around movement. And I didn't want to work with anybody that was sick. And I didn't want to be around any kind of blood. And I didn't want to be around any kind of life or death situations.
Okay.
So when you put all that together, physical therapy seems to be the most appropriate path. So I did my undergraduate degree in exercise science at the University of Buffalo, and I stayed there for my physical therapy schooling, which is a 3-year doctorate program. While in physical therapy school, I did internships all over the country. I did one in Boston, I did one in Manhattan, one in San Francisco, basically with the goal of just getting as many different experiences with as many different people as possible. And I eventually settled in Indianapolis to be close to my girlfriend, who was going to dental school at IU at the time, the downtown campus. And I have been living and working in Indianapolis ever since.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it's kind of ironic we have that dental connection, isn't it? So
Yes.
we were talking about that before we hit record. It's a very small dental world that exists. So super fun that your girlfriend is an orthodontist. I think that's awesome. And so talk to us a little bit about how the whole video thing started, TikTok, Instagram. Were you on it to any significant degree before the pandemic, or was this a complete pandemic thing where you were like, all right, well, what are we going to do now? Tell us about that.
It was a purely pandemic thing. So I work in a pretty unique setting. It's an outpatient setting, but it exists in an office building, a big office building, the government center for Indiana. So all the government employees that work in person for the state come and work in this massive campus where we also operate a clinic where I am the physical therapist.
Got it.
On any given normal day, 8,000 people come to work, and I had a very full schedule treating people. We also have in the clinic, we have a PA and a medical assistant. We have a dentist. We have a nutritionist, we have a psychologist. So it's a one-stop shop for everybody that works there. But of course, in the pandemic, everybody stopped working.
Yeah.
There were a few weeks where I had absolutely no patients. I had no caseload. I had nothing to do. And as a part of that nothing to do, I downloaded TikTok. And much like many other people, I got completely lost in the app, and it sucked me in and held me pretty hard. Yeah. There was one week where I spent an upsetting amount of time on it. And I thought to myself, I can't keep spending all this time on this app without any kind of production coming out of it. And I had seen some other, whether they be chiropractors or other physical therapists or even members of the fitness industry, I had seen them post, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I could do that. And if I start doing that, it'll give me an excuse to be on the app and not feel so bad about it.
Right.
And so I started posting, and a couple went completely viral,
Mhm.
and I've just been growing the page ever since. I have not stopped since I started posting in May of the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, I must have found you on Instagram in particular soon after you started. And I was just fascinated because of my own trials and tribulations becoming disabled as a dentist. I've had quite a number of physical therapists, including one here in Phoenix that's a friend as well. And so I just thought, well, this is kind of interesting. And so, I love your content. I love, it's entertaining. You definitely have a sense of humor about you, and which is kind of needed to get people's attention, particularly when it comes to something medical. And so, when you think about where you are today in terms of number of followers versus when you started and things went viral, like, tell us about your level of surprise about how this took off.
The entire thing has been surprising.
Yeah.
When I first started, it wasn't just an excuse to use TikTok and feel good about it. I was also terrified that I had no caseload, and
Sure.
it was very possible that my job was going to be taken away because we just couldn't sustain as a practice when there's nobody to treat.
Sure.
And I wasn't quite sure how long the pandemic was going to last. It seems like we're still very much in it. And I was trying to think of ways that I could maintain some level of income using physical therapy, but in a way that couldn't be taken away from me as easily.
Sure.
And everybody has a phone and I have a camera. And I thought that maybe one day I can start to get enough followers that I can get some ads or whatever, but never did I ever think it was going to become this big. So the whole thing has just been a wild ride, and I still can't really quite wrap my head around it. So it's much easier to just pretend that all those follower numbers are fake and just keep trying to post like I normally do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you think about your progression in your videos, let's just say the first 10 versus, some of the ones I saw you release some today, the day that we're recording. How much time does that typically take you to produce these?
When I first started, I could probably churn out a 30-second TikTok in maybe 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
Really kind of make sure everything was framed and figure out my voice and how I was going to say things. And I've gotten that number down to, I could probably make a 30-second TikTok now in 5 minutes.
Okay.
And the production value is still much higher. I feel like I've kind of conquered the learning curve a little bit.
Got it. Yeah, I should take some lessons from you because I haven't. I do reels here and there, but I haven't really jumped into TikTok yet. But and when you think about your videos, like, what are some of your favorites that you've done, whether it's a video specifically or even a topic that you've focused on?
So the most helpful ones that I think I've done, and helpful ones and ones that are kind of my favorites are kind of different, but the most helpful ones that I've done, I did a whole week on knees, and never did I realize how many people out there are dealing with knee trouble. Yes. So when I did my week on knees, that took me from about 300,000 followers all the way to 600,000 followers just for a week on knees.
Wow.
And a lot of the content that I try to put out there is more informational than anything, because you can't really give any helpful advice to the masses in 20 seconds.
Yep.
So most of what I try to do is just present information and present what options you might have if you align with that information. And tens of thousands of comments of people saying that, oh, I didn't realize that was a normal thing. I didn't realize that I could be helped. Or, oh, I had talked to my doctor and he said there was nothing I could do but take pain medication. And now I know that I have another option.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of responses are certainly the most rewarding.
That's awesome.
I think the most fun one that I ever did was when the WAP dance was really popular on TikTok. What I did was I took that dance and I took the end ranges of all of the varying positions of dance, and I turned each one into a stretch or a yoga position. And every time I watch it, even to this day, it still makes me laugh. It's probably the only video I've ever posted that kind of makes me laugh. And so that's probably
that's awesome.
That's probably my favorite. That's my sneaky favorite.
That's awesome. It's always interesting to kind of go back and look at your body of work and what your favorite is versus, what potentially tracks with the audience, regardless of the topic itself. What do you think are some of the biggest lessons you've learned in this little TikTok journey of yours?
Probably the biggest lesson that I've learned is just a new appreciation for how little information there is on conservative therapy or conservative means for recovering from something. I, of course, live and work as a physical therapist, so I have exposure to it, but for the most part, I have repeat patients that have been in physical therapy before, or people have been referred to physical therapy from another provider, and so they have a general idea of what's going on before they get to me. Now that I have a voice to just the general population, I've gained a really new appreciation for just how little people know about what else is out there, because for the most part, you go see a GP after straining your back or hurting yourself, and they're going to prescribe you some pain medication and tell you to go, lay down for a week.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's where a lot of these issues start. It's a tweak that is probably a little bit more than a tweak. And then resting that for 2 to 3 weeks, all of a sudden now it turns into a bigger thing. And then by the time you end up getting to a physical therapist, it's so late in the process that the recovery turns into a real project. Yeah. And so now I feel like I'm able to get to people a little earlier, and they know if like, oh, I have a little tweak in the ankle where maybe I can just try this thing that I saw on TikTok. And then hopefully it never turns into that, what it would have turned into otherwise.
Sure. Absolutely. And it's interesting because you mentioned a couple moments ago about the fact that you got to be careful, in air quotes, the kind of advice you give over a video, and kudos to you, because those are the kinds of things I typically watch for. I mean, obviously I'm a dentist, not a physical therapist, but yet still feel I know enough where I'm like, oh, that was really well done because of how you said it, what you said it, and how to advise people going forward. And so, what you're doing is such a great service to everybody, and also, very effectively towing that line of information versus diagnosis or giving advice. So I think that's really fantastic. So I wanted to kind of just talk to you about, Dan, the person. I know we were chatting before we came on the line, and we mentioned earlier, you've been with your girlfriend a number of years, and she happens to be an orthodontist, which is hysterical. And so how do you think your friends would describe you, Dr. Dan?
Boy, I think they would describe me as loyal, funny, honest. Boy, I'll have to ask them. I don't really.
No, I think that's great. Yeah. No,
I think those would be some of the major pillars, though. Those would be the keys, I would say.
Absolutely. Funny, honest, loyal. And it's reflected in your channel. If you think about it, it's funny, it's honest, it's, trying to help people without kind of going over that line. I think that makes a lot of sense. So, in terms of your training, you've lived in a number of different areas in the country. And so, which one would you think was your favorite in terms of where you've kind of hung your hat over the years?
I would say my favorite probably is here in Indianapolis, where I am right now. And that might be simply a product of the fact that I'm actually making money, and I can go to restaurants and I can go to bars and things like that.
Yeah.
The most fascinating place that I was, so I'm from a town called Poughkeepsie, New York, which is about 60 miles due north of Manhattan, right up the Hudson line.
Yep.
And I did a 3-month internship in Manhattan in a clinic that was in the MetLife building, which is attached to Grand Central. So right smack dab in the middle of everything. And that was probably the most fascinating place that I'll ever work, because everybody was either a high-powered lawyer or accountant, or they were a creative.
Interesting.
And so I would have days where I would go from treating this aloof writer to the most intense accountant that you've ever met in your life, because he's there for 40 minutes and 40 minutes is all he has, and he's got to get in and out of there. And that was a really good lesson on, both those patients are not going to respond to the same thing.
Right.
You kind of have to treat them differently and go about things a different way. And so that was probably the most fascinating and interesting place that I've worked.
It's New York is certainly a melting pot. And later this season, Chris Kane is going to be on, who's been on Broadway in Kinky Boots, and he's going to talk about his experiences on Broadway and the pandemic and those kind of things. So that'll be a fun interview, I think, as well. So
that'll be great. I actually I once treated a Broadway stage director while I was there, and my girlfriend was coming to visit, because at the time she was in Indiana and I was in New York City. And I kind of just dropped the fact that, oh, my girlfriend's coming. He's like, oh, do you have any plans? And I was like, well, we're going to try and get to a show, wink, wink. And he goes, oh, do you want to see my show? And I was like, yeah. And so he left us 2 tickets at will call. Me and my girlfriend showed up. We claimed the tickets. They were like 5th row, center stage. We go and sit down. He comes up at the start of the show. He's like, is everything comfortable? Are you doing okay? And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. At intermission, the house manager came over and asked the same questions, and people are looking around being like, who is this? Who is this? Like, who is this? And I nudged my girlfriend and I was like, hey, listen, this is the coolest thing that's ever going to happen. So just soak this in, because I don't know if we're ever going to get this again. But
that's hysterical.
Growing up in Poughkeepsie and having that experience, I've been to probably about 10 Broadway shows, and I've got a really a deep appreciation for that art form. So I'm sure that'll be a great interview.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just made me think, that 10-year-old kid in Poughkeepsie, if you could go back today and talk to 10-year-old Dan, what would you tell him?
10-year-old Dan was extremely self-conscious. I was always really tall, really gangly. I'm currently 6'8", and so I obviously got started up the growing tree pretty young. And it took a very long time to be comfortable in my own skin. I never really left the house at all. I had a good amount of friends in school, but not a lot of friends that I would go to houses with. And I think I learned a lot going through that, but also I'd like to tell 10-year-old Dan, like, just get out of your head and get out there, man. Like, it's going to be fine. Like, people are nice and you're going to be great. Like, just go do things. So I think that would be my bit of advice for young Dan. Yeah,
I think that's fantastic. I love that. And if we can stay on this trajectory of advice for a moment, like, there's lots of athletes in the world, lots of people interested in physical therapy, physical fitness. And, when you think about your own career, TikTok stuff aside, what kinds of things might you say to somebody that was thinking about physical therapy?
For the most part, anytime a student asks me that is interested in getting into physical therapy, the 2 things that I always tell them are, one, make sure that you really have a wanting to help people. If you're going to have a good time in physical therapy, it's because you genuinely enjoy helping people and getting people to a place that they couldn't have gotten to themselves and improving their quality of life.
Absolutely.
And then the second thing that I tell them is that you need to have a curiosity and an appreciation for the human body. If you're able to be interested enough in the human body to view everybody as a puzzle and understand how things are connected and how things work together, and you get enjoyment out of finding the little differences to figure out why every ACL reconstruction is a little different. Every ankle sprain is a little different. The causes are all different. If you're curious enough to dive deep and find it interesting enough as a puzzle, and you want to help people, it's going to be a pretty great profession for you.
I love that. Being being curious and looking at things as a puzzle. It's kind of almost like when I talk to some of my coaching clients, it's like, well, is this a problem or is this an opportunity? Like what is a different way that we can look at this to kind of change the conversation, to open up our mind to look for possibilities? Because as you said, every ACL repair is a little different. Every ankle sprain is different. And so in that difference is where we can find our inspiration. I guess that's like
100%.
as well.
And to your point, when you're dealing with a person in pain, it's very easy for that person to get lost in that pain and to feel down about their pain and to have that pain really take over and only focus on the negative parts of it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of, if you're a good physical therapist and you're genuinely trying to help somebody, you get them to not focus on the pain and focus on the problem. Well, what got us here? Here's the problem. And here are a bunch of solutions.
Yep. Absolutely.
If I look at somebody and let's say they have some neck tension, one of the more common causes of neck tension is weakness in the rotator cuff, because now the neck muscles have to overwork for work that the rotator cuff cannot do. And I test their rotator cuff strength. And I mean, I can move their arm with one finger. I mean, it is weak. It's very easy to feel, if you're in the patient's shoes, self-conscious about that weakness, worried about that weakness. And then I always try to change it to be like, no, like, this is awesome. Look at how much you have to work on.
I love it.
I would be concerned if you had a strong like if your rotator cuff was a 10 out of 10 strength, then I would be concerned. But now everything makes sense. Like, of course this is weak and that's why this is happening. Like, look at all this room we have to grow. And kind of changing that story is a big part of my practice.
That's incredible. You know, I'm a huge positive psychology, personal development fan. And one of the piece of research I love has always been by Barbara Fredrickson. And she talks about the broaden and build theory and just how our brains work as human beings. And, you know, when we're primed to be open and positive, we actually see things differently. We see more of a given image than just the distracting detail that's right in front of us. And it's a fascinating thing because you know, when you get too stuck in, let's say, a differential diagnosis, you know, because you're getting distracted by some initial presenting signs, it can lead you down the wrong path. And that's not medicine or physical therapy, that's life, right? And we get distracted by those things. And so I love that. I think that's fantastic to really have that open aperture, because you're right. I mean, I have been a chronic pain sufferer myself, and it can be incredibly frustrating and debilitating to live that way, particularly because it's not like you wear a sign around your neck saying, oh, I'm in pain. And so, you know, there's a lot of embarrassment of having to ask for help. And, you know, I remember one time I was in an airplane and had to ask somebody because I was having a bad day to put my bag up, you know, and I remember they kind of looked at me like, well, what's wrong with you? It's like, well, there's a lot wrong with me. So, so yeah, I think that positivity is absolutely fantastic. What are, I'm just kind of curious back to kind of the social media presence stuff. Like, you know, what are some of the kind of the odder kind of things that people have asked or stated? Social media is such an odd playground, and I call it keyboard bravery. What kind of crazy stuff has come up over the years, over the last year and a half for you?
So a lot of stuff, certainly I'd care not to share.
Of course. I figured that would be answer number one. I figured that, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of that kind of stuff is just the pure, you know, especially with TikTok.
Yeah.
At least where TikTok was, I mean, it still is that way today. I think I've just trained the algorithm enough to get out of that side of TikTok.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of over sexualization of people and, you know, the thirst trap culture and things like that. So a lot of the interesting comments that I get are from that side of TikTok, certainly.
Sure.
Kind of the objectification and things like that. And so I do have about 40 words that I've blocked in my comment section, and they're all related to that.
Oh, good. Okay.
Other than that, the comments, especially now that I've gotten bigger, when I was a smaller creator, a lot of it was that kind of
stuff.
objectification and things like that. And it was all kinds of stuff. But now that I've gotten a little bigger and people are used to seeing my face and they kind of know what I'm about, my comment section has gotten overly appropriate. Like it's fantastic.
Oh, good.
It's been wonderful. And
That's
then the only odd comment that I get is somebody that's just so confused about what I'm trying to present because they just have no exposure to the human body and don't have that same background of education.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of view that as a teaching opportunity more than anything else.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Because I pale in comparison in terms of followers to you, but even still, you get those inappropriate comments, the spam comments, all that kind of crazy stuff. And there's so much just telling with not a lot of listening in the world, particularly on social media, that the common courteous, intelligent discourses in many ways kind of gone out the window on certain areas of the social universe. So yeah, it's kind of something I'm always kind of intrigued to ask. And I've heard similar from others as well, where it's like when you start out, it's kind of in that vein. And then as with stick-to-itiveness and people understanding what your message is and what you're trying to do, it gets more into the helpful normal space, shall we say. But so cool. Well, what's next for you? Where do you envision yourself in the next couple of years?
So I currently work with a company called TX Team, and TX Team is the company that provides these on-site physical therapy clinics. And we have a few all over the country, and I am definitely going to stick with the company, but on the horizon, my role within that company is going to change to give me more time to dive into YouTube to make longer form educational videos. Also possibly do some more speaking engagements, possibly start a podcast myself perhaps, and then maybe write a book. Right now I'm going to try and take advantage of the momentum that I've built up as much as possible, just so I can try to help and spread the word to as many people as possible. And I plan on taking it as far as it will go, just like I've done thus far. And then if people happen to stop caring and things teeter out, then I'll just pack my bags and go right back to being a normal physical therapist. But TX Team and myself are kind of on the same page of, well, let's see exactly where this thing will go if we put a little bit more time into it.
That's great. No, kudos to you, I guess, because I remember last week or the week before you were posting about how, when this started, you just started making videos. And now you're flying across the country to make these produced videos. And now I've just put two and two together. So that's fantastic. So kudos to you for that. So that's awesome. So, I always kind of like to wrap up with kind of a more thought-provoking question, if you will. And so if you had to think about your audience and you think about your own journey, and there's someone there that you're interacting with, and they're kind of in their own way, trying to make their own way, regardless of what it is, like, what would you say to that person?
If they're kind of just lost in the world or kind of down and out, or if there's one thing that I've learned treating people in pain, especially with the chronic pain, with that depression tie-in, and maybe they can't work their normal job and they can't see their friends like they used to, and that's a pretty normal occurrence. The one thing that I've learned is just talk to them. Just have a conversation. Just have a normal conversation about anything that you can find to connect over, whether it's cooking or Marvel movies or the weather or your favorite sports team. Just restoring some level of normalcy and talking about something that doesn't involve their pain, and then using that as a means to grow a relationship. And then when they're ready, people will always come to you. I feel like
Absolutely.
if you've done a good job of being a good listener, and you've done a good job of just having a conversation, when people are ready, then they'll come to you. And I think that part's easy.
Yeah.
Because because they'll tell you everything they need to get off their chest if you're just willing to sit there and listen. And then that's what it's all about, is really the listening and just knowing that they're there for you.
Yeah, that human connection, that's universal, bridging gaps despite where we all come from and having different backgrounds and different experiences and so forth. So that's fantastic. Well, I really want to thank you for your time today. This has been super fun and enlightening, and it's really been a great way to kind of talk to the man behind the videos, if you will. And so I want to sincerely thank Dr. Dan for his time today. And we're going to have all of your TikTok and your Instagram links in the comments section below. And, for everybody listening, I certainly invite you to go ahead and subscribe and click those notifications so you don't miss any of our future interviews in season 2. And as I always like to conclude our interview discussions, I just want y'all to remember that life speaks to you. And if you think it doesn't, you're not listening. Take care. Thanks, Dan. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.